want to live. Oh, it's a uniquely cruel disease because you lose your loved ones way before their physical body passes. And in my father's case, it was, 1 year and gone. Right. In my mom's case, she also had dementia, but she had Alzheimer's disease, and she also had psychosis. So my mom, my mom's decline was really different because she went through a lot of different phases. And here in 2002, she was, there was no sign of any illness that I knew of. But the following year, that was when my father got sick. Or we knew that my father was sick because he was probably covering up symptoms for a long time. My parents lived in Florida and we were in northern New Jersey. And when I spoke to my father on the phone, he sounded fine. It was when we actually saw him in person in Florida in 2003 that we knew things were starting to go. In 2009, I brought my mother to live with us in New Jersey because she needed to have her gallbladder operated on. And she was afraid of having it done in Florida because her doctor had said that he thought she would have to have conventional surgery, which scared the hell out of her, and rightly so. So I brought her up to be with us, and we, I got her treated here in New Jersey, and they were able to do her laparoscopically. And she got so much better so quickly, she demanded to go back to Florida. And at that point, I'd been with her long enough to know that she had issues already, and that I wasn't comfortable sending her back without some kind of backup.
When you say issues, you mean mental issues?
Yes, she was showing signs of forgetfulness,
memory loss.
Yeah. And I was concerned about her being on her own, and that was when I hired a caregiver for her in Florida.
Tracy, do you feel that the death of your dad prompted your mom to have quicker symptoms of Alzheimer's when you look back in retrospect?
No, you know what, Eileen? I don't think so. Because I think she fought to be independent. She had 2 years where she was completely on her own and independent, and she did well during those years. But she too had some other issues that we weren't aware of. Like later on, in the last year of her life, I learned that she had polycythemia vera, which went undiagnosed, and she probably had it in 2006 when she'd had a heart attack. And I diagnosed that one over the phone. She told me that she felt she had a clot in her chest, but it's okay because it moved. And at that point, I said, Mom, I really want you to go to the doctor. She argued with me and said she'd rather go down to the pool, but I persuaded her to put on her street clothes, and I called the doctor, made an appointment for her, and made her go down, and he confirmed that she'd had a heart attack. And that probably came from the polycythemia vera, because that's a condition that causes the bone marrow to generate too many red blood cells. So the likelihood was that she did have a clot in her chest and it landed in her heart. And it was amazing to me when I learned that she had that illness that nobody caught it sooner.
She was living untreated then.
Yes.
With that disease.
Yes.
That disease.
Yes. Likely for at least 9 years, probably longer. But it's a very rare disease, and it usually manifests in men, so nobody was looking for it. So, so Mom went back to Florida for a while, but by 2010, I brought her back to New Jersey. She lived with, she was in assisted living for a short period of time. She hated it and admitted that she would prefer to live with Bob and me. And so she came to live with us in our house. And then she started having symptoms that were concerning, and she finally had a psychotic break in December of 2010. And that's when I started her long-term care claim and started hiring caregivers in our home. And ultimately, I got to a point where I couldn't take care of her here. She went to assisted living. Had another major episode where she had a UTI, became profoundly psychotic, landed in a psychiatric hospital, and that's when I met you. So, so here's the thing. Both of my parents succumbed to dementia. How I won that particular lottery is anybody's guess. But I learned some things that are really important that I feel like I really am morally obligated to share with anybody who's willing to listen. Number one is illness is hard, and facing it without preparation is harder. So, so we're back. So, so my first big brush with losing a relative was with my dad, and it was tough for me because my dad wasn't just my dad, but he was my friend. Mm-hmm. We had a really lovely relationship where he was accepting of both my brother and me. He loved to listen to what we were doing. He was very interested in our lives. He wasn't judgmental. He was helpful. At the age of 73, he got his first computer, and I used to give him computer lessons over the phone. And he loved learning new stuff. And when he got sick and stopped learning, that was when it was a clear indication that something was really terribly wrong, because he loved his gadgets. He loved to eat. He's the first person I knew who bought a digital camera and was able to go out, buy the camera, learn how to use it, and within 2 days he used it, took pictures at a party, and emailed them to me. That's a big deal. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know people in their 20s and 30s. Yeah. So it was very impressive that he was able to do that. So when things started going wrong with him, it was a very tough loss, because he was a good guy. He was a smart guy. He was a funny guy, and my mother was very dependent on him. And the thing that I thought would happen didn't happen, which I thought my mother would go like right after my father. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they were so interdependent. Mm-hmm. I really didn't think that my mom would be able to hang on by herself. But God bless Rosie. She did a great job.
Let me ask you, I'm not seeing many clients now as a care manager that have long-term care insurance. Mm. Do you think, from your experience with your parents, that they made the right decision? In having long-term care? Because I feel families aren't really aware of long-term care insurance and how it could benefit them or not benefit them.
Right. Well, people misunderstand long-term care, mm-hmm. and there's a perception that, first of all, that that the only answer is long-term care insurance.
Right.
There are, I like to call them long-term care strategies, mm-hmm. because depending on your family, your assets, what you want, what your prognosis is, there are different kinds of solutions out there, and most people just think it's one thing, and it's ridiculously expensive. Right. And my parents did some smart things, and at the time that they got long-term care insurance, they got it when nobody else was getting it.
Mm-hmm.
And they also they did their wills.
Mm-hmm.
They did their advance directives. They took care of the legal piece.
Now, were they including you and your brother throughout this whole process, or
No.
were they doing it on their own?
They were doing it on their own.
Which is not very typical.
No, but for my dad, it was typical.
Okay.
This was, he was in a position in his life where he understood the burden part.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people, when they talk about, I don't want to be a burden, they don't want to talk about end stage. They don't want to talk about the possibilities. My father was more than willing to take on the responsibility for planning for that end phase.
And looking at it
square on, because he didn't want us to have to shoulder the financial responsibility.
Right.
He knew that there was a very high probability, considering his medical history,
right,
that things were going to go wrong and he was going to need care.
So some things that I just want to confirm with you that they were proactive in for
Mm-hmm.
aging was they purchased long-term care insurance.
Yes.
They had power of attorney.
Mm-hmm.
They had a health care proxy.
Yes.
Both of them.
Yes.
They had their wills completed.
Mm-hmm. And advance directives.
Okay. And did they do funeral?
That they didn't do. That they didn't do. And they did not want to talk with us.
That was my next question.
They did not want to talk with us about it. They felt like they had it handled. And when Herb, my dad, became sick, he connected me with his financial planner.
Mm-hmm.
And this was like in 2003. So her name was Roberta. God bless you wherever you are, Roberta. I know she's no longer on this side of the astral plane, but she did say some things to me which made it clear that my parents had done some things, but they hadn't done everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so she compelled me to ask them some questions. And fortunately, it was early enough in the process that my father was able to plug in and help out, because he knew where everything was. Mm. He knew, and the really interesting thing was with his dementia, he'd be completely out of it. He'd be hallucinating and not really connecting. And then I would get a piece of mail from an annuity company or an insurance company, and I'd open it up and go, what the hell is this? And I'd say whatever the name of it was. And all of a sudden he'd become alert, and he would talk about what the product was and how it worked and why he bought it and what the interest rate was. And he would remember, rattle off all the details about it. So I was very fortunate in that regard, because he was able to help out. And that was really majorly important. So, we were able to get a lot of things done. Now, he was a challenge in a lot of respects because he was such a strong personality. Like the first time I tried to hire a caregiver, and folks, if you've ever been in this situation, when you're the patient's child, it's mortifying, because you arrange to have somebody come to the house, someone who's qualified, someone who's background checked, someone who's totally legit, and they come to the house, and your parent decides they don't want this stinking stranger in their house, and they throw them out.
Mm-hmm. Very common.
Oh yeah. But when you first witness that, you're the one who made the phone call, and they're throwing them out, and you feel like a jerk, and you think you're the only person in the world that's ever happened to. And it's important to note that it happens to just about everybody. Right?
That would be a great topic to talk about with families, and discussing how to pick the caregivers, and someone who's compatible and feels comfortable in your parents' care, in their care, and being participants in that.
Yeah, yeah. But first, you got to get past the hand, right?
That's for sure.
Because there was another time when my father was hallucinating constantly, and he was acting out. And one morning, my mom woke up with bruises on her arm. And I realized it was like stuff that my dad was doing in his sleep. And he didn't realize he wasn't trying to hurt her, but he was hurting her. And I got to the point where I was like, look, you guys can't sleep in the same bed anymore because he's going to hurt you. And I didn't have another bed for her.
Right.
So, and at the same time, in his diminished capacity, she was the one person he needed to see. Because he would be, his short-term memory was so shot that within seconds he would forget the answer to a question. He would forget why we were driving to a specific location. And he would freak him out. But as long as he saw Rosie,
she became his comfort zone.
Yeah, she was his touchstone. He needed to see
her. Which is very
her.
Common with the disease process.
Yes. And so we needed to find an accommodation where he could be cared for to an extent, but she would be close at hand. So when he's freaking out, she can quickly be there for him. So we found an assisted living facility between my brother's place and my place, where they had a 2-bedroom suite, so that she could sleep in her own bed, he could sleep in his own bed. But when he was freaking out, she could like run in, and
so she became part of the care process of being hands off, but yet hands on when needed. So it's very important that when families do look for facilities or hire caregivers, that these facilities and these caregivers are trained with dealing with dementia, Alzheimer's, and the disease process, but most importantly with the behaviors, because behaviors are very common.
Yes.
I'm finding it's not as simple as grandma aging and sitting there and just speaking nicely to you. There's more behind it now.
Yes.
And they have to be trained and make sure that they have the knowledge and be able to deal with your parents or your loved ones.
Yes. And the willingness. You know, when it came to my mom, her violent outbursts made her undesirable in a lot of facilities. And when we first met, my concern was that if she were to be accepted at a facility, that the staff might be inclined to give her extra medication to keep her calm.
Right.
And one of the things that you and I came together on was that when someone is exhibiting symptoms and behaviors, if they're in the right environment, you can influence those symptoms and behaviors so that they're
absolutely. I think families, when they come across dealing, and you may be able, I'm sure you can relate to this, Alzheimer's and dementia, there's two things going on. You have to deal with the medical component of the disease. So that could be your high blood pressure, it could be your diabetes, it could be your vascular issues, your UTIs. So it's medical. And then you have the mental situation that you deal with, the short-term memory loss, the long-term memory loss behaviors. And if you don't deal with them separately, but yet together, you're never going to solve what's actually going on. Because the whole time you have to anticipate your parents' needs or your loved one's needs, because they can't tell you what they're experiencing and what they're feeling. It's part of the disease, so you have to play mind reader.
Right.
So it's important that the family is aware that there are two different situations going on. And I feel why we were so successful in helping Rosie is because we were able to separate the two, but yet bring it together.
Yeah, absolutely,
Right?
absolutely. And well, there are so many aspects to it. Knowing her as well as I did,
Mm-hmm.
there was also a lot of, again, preparation. When she was living with me, I knew that her nature was to be distrustful, right? And I was one of the people that she trusted in the
Right.
world. And I used to say to her, even when she was still living with me, there's going to be a time when you think that I'm trying to pull stuff on you.
Mm-hmm.
And that I'm doing things to you. And you always have to remember, no matter what, I'm on your side. And I'm always going to be acting in your best interest. And she got it.